Hi, my name is Deanna Britt, and I am the owner of Law Clerk On Demand. We are a provider of real estate lead lists. Real estate lead lists include fresh information from your local courthouse. Information such as probates, evictions, code violations, tax delinquents, you name it. Our team of law clerks report to the courthouse every single month and pull fresh information. Let's talk about who can use a lead list. Whether you're a real estate agent or a real estate investor, you can benefit from using a real estate lead list. A real estate lead list is a list of cases or information that has been pulled from sources such as your local courthouse, and investors or real estate agents can use that information for direct mail or for cold calling or even text messaging potential sellers of their home. You want to reach out to that seller and offer your services. Let's talk about solution-based approach to real estate marketing. This means listening to the seller and their needs and deciding what is the best solution for their situation. Real estate is not a one-size-fits-all, so you want to make sure that when you're meeting with the seller, you're actively listening to figure out what the best approach would be for their situation. For example, you may meet with a seller and that seller is looking for a cash offer. They're looking for something fast. Another seller may be looking to list their property. Or perhaps creative financing is the appropriate structure for that particular situation. But it's super important that when you're meeting with the seller, you're talking to them, you're asking questions, and you as a real estate investor or real estate agent are prepared to be the solution to their problem. So what lists are available? Well, let's start with my favorite. My favorite would be the probate list or the eviction list. Each list includes an accurate phone number in most cases. Other lists that we have available include code violations, tax delinquents, divorce lists, pre-foreclosure lists. Each list is pulled fresh from the courthouse, provided in a Microsoft Excel, ready to be uploaded into whatever database or system you are using in your business, and new information is pulled and made available every single month. Let's talk about marketing headaches. So every single day, every meeting, I'm always talking to investors and real estate agents about their frustration with marketing, whether it's returned mail, bad phone numbers, saturation, you name it. One of the reasons why I love Courthouse List is because most of the information is going to be accurate. It's as indicated by the person that filled out the form. Therefore, we're not dealing with the frustration of our letters coming right back to us because the information is dated. Another reason why I enjoy List is because the information is really recent. If you're talking to a list provider, one of the best questions to ask is, when was the information generated? It always surprises me how many lists are sold and purchased by real estate investors or agents, and we have no idea when the list was pulled. So start asking these questions. How old is the information? What is the process for pulling the information? Are these recent cases? And what is going on with the individual that is actually on the list? Let's talk about phone numbers. One of the most frustrating issues that I hear from real estate investors and real estate agents is that they're receiving lists or skip tracing lists and they have no phone number or a bad phone number. How frustrating is that? You've paid your VA, you have paid your team member, and that person is constantly dialing bad phone numbers. I would be frustrated myself. One of the ways that we can tackle that issue is identifying lists that actually have an accurate phone number included. I would rather spend my time calling and following up with an accurate phone number than 6 bad phone numbers. You tell me in the comments what you think. Let's talk about saturation. It's a very frustrating topic. Real estate investors and real estate agents are so frustrated about tackling the same leads. I mean, everyone's calling that list. Everyone's driving for dollars. Everyone's putting out signs. So what do? In my opinion, the best thing to do is to get recent information, to find a way to talk to new people who have just entered their frustrating situation recently. A lot of times that can be done with a court list. Whether it's a divorce list, whether it's a probate list, let's find some people who have just left the courthouse, who have just received a headache, some sort of frustration, and while they may not be ready to sell immediately, we know that something has changed in their situation versus approaching sellers that have been in their situation for months or for years. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the 1,000th letter, right? We spend so much money on direct mail. We spend so much money on our letters and our postcards. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to people who actually want to hear from us, or maybe we're the 30th letter versus the 1,000th. Just something to consider. Tell me what you think. Let's talk about budgeting. So as a new investor, one of the things that I really encourage is for you to think about a marketing budget. And so you may ask yourself, well, what's a marketing budget, right? So that is the amount of money that you can spend consistently in your marketing. So every single month, whether that's $100, I want to ask myself, can I consistently spend $100 on my marketing every single month? If the answer is no, then perhaps I need to spend a little bit less. But these are the questions that we want to ask ourselves, because at the end of the day, the way that we win is being consistent. Let's talk about tracking. So what's worse, not calling your leads or calling some leads, failing to take notes, and then you forget about that lead, and guess what? You see that same lead has been closed by your peer through your email, or you just hear about it. How does that happen? That happens from failing to track and follow up on your leads. The most important thing that you'll do in any business is making sure that you're taking accurate notes so that you can have successful follow-up. You may not realize, but you may have to actually reach out to a seller 7 times, 8 times, 9 times before they actually decide they want to meet with you and they actually need to do business. We also need to consider what's happening if you're reaching out to a seller monthly. Something about their situation could be changing, and what you don't want to do is get frustrated on the first attempt to reach out to a seller when they tell you no. We want to make sure that you are not affected by the no's and that you're there readily available, sending a letter or making a phone call every single month to that seller so that they don't forget about you. Because what you don't want is for one of your peers to close a deal that you originally reached out to months ago. Let's talk about probate. So you may have heard that every investor should be building their pipeline with probate deals, right? And so what's really important is that we understand why probate is so important and what is going on in the mind of someone who has filed probate. Probate is the process in any state for dealing with the administration of a will. So whether that person has a will or the person does not have a will, and the court is going to determine how their assets are distributed. So what does that mean to a real estate investor? It means that there are tons of people every single month who are filing probate, and they are going to inherit a home that they may not be attached to, that they may need to get rid of. And you as an investor or a real estate agent can help them dispose of that property. Every single month, there are new individuals who are filing, and so we want to make sure that we are actually reaching out to those individuals. But the most important thing is to understand as an investor, as a real estate agent, that this is indeed a court process. That process could vary. It could take anywhere from 2 months to a year to several years, depending on the situation. We have to keep in mind that this is a court process and it's not predictable how fast that particular deal will close. What we can do is continue to remind the seller and educate the seller as to what they're going through, and that you have done probate deals before, or if you personally have not done a probate deal, perhaps you have people on your team that can assist that seller with getting through the process. I personally feel that the more investors that are aware of the probate process and that can educate and counsel sellers as we're meeting with them, I believe our integrity and our credibility will go up in the profession, and a seller is more likely to work with you if you are coming across as credible and familiar with the process. So let's talk about marketing to probates. So you may have heard about direct mail marketing. We want to make sure that our direct mail is appropriate when you're actually sending a letter or a postcard to a seller. In my opinion, I don't believe that you should mention the probate on your letter. I think it's more important to just send your generic mail piece or just send them a letter and let them know what it is that you are providing and that you're buying houses in the area. But in my opinion, I believe that if you send a letter and you mention the probate, you could, so to speak, reopen the wound. You're reminding that person that someone has passed away. I personally would not want a letter reminding me of anyone in my life that's passed away. So I think that that is just an area that we don't need to go into. I don't think your mail piece needs to do that. And also, I think when you meet with the seller, they'll tell you the story. If we're meeting with the seller and we're actively listening, the seller will tell you what's happening with that property and what their plan is. Okay, so all of that doesn't need to be in a mail piece because it's not going to be received very well. Another way to reach out to probate individuals that are on a probate list is to give them a cold call. I do feel like the approach is the same on a cold call. You can successfully give them a call, tell them who you are, what your services are, without mentioning the probate. If you are actively listening, if you are building rapport on that phone call, the seller will tell you that someone passed away in the property. There's no reason for us to bring that up on the phone call. It's not going to be received well. Sometimes people only hear pieces of what you have to say. And so you don't want the piece of what they have to say to be the reminder that their loved one passed away. Okay, so those are two great ways. You can also use text messaging, sending a text message, introducing yourself. Hi, I'm buying houses in your area. I just did a renovation in your area. Can I meet with you? So it's pretty much the same as what you would say in a letter. But of course, we're finding that text messaging is having a much faster and higher response rate. Let's talk about a few reasons why I love probate lists. All right, I'll tell you anytime that you hear me speak, any presentation, that probate is one of my favorite lists. I think it's definitely an opportunity for investors and real estate agents to really show compassion and support our community. As from a saturation standpoint, I think probate presents an opportunity to talk to new people every single month. Also, you can cut competition if you're reaching out in like further areas, because number one, while we're all aware that the courthouse, has information available, a lot of people aren't consistent. It's just the truth. So if you are consistently using a service to pull that information, you have a way to take advantage of the fresh information that's in the courthouse every single month. Another cool thing is that there's varied house conditions. Not everyone on the probate list is going to have the horrible, ugly house that requires a full renovation. Some houses just need a little bit of work. Some houses, it's going to be a very smooth process. So I think it's a way to kind of dig for treasure and find new opportunities as an investor, as an agent. It's just new information that's available. Also, if you are a new investor, the list is manageable. Okay, people are also, often shocked by the numbers of leads that are on a probate list. But if you have a really good, fresh probate list, this list is a lot smaller. And so therefore, you're less likely to be losing leads. As I always say, follow-up is super important. So you want to make sure that you have something that you can actually manage as a new investor. And the way that that's done is actually getting a smaller, accurate list that you're actually putting into your system. And for every phone call made, for every letter that's sent, there's some sort of note that follows it. That's much more likely in a list of 100 versus a list of several thousand. And another reason why I enjoy probate is the fact that there's typically an accurate phone number included. You want to make sure that you're not investing in a list that has just a bunch of bad phone numbers. With probate, you should be able to have an accurate phone number for most entries on your list. Sometimes the phone number just isn't available, but if there is, it's typically an accurate phone number. So those are all the reasons why I love probate. Let's talk about the mindset of a probate seller. So probate is pretty interesting because while we may assume that everyone on a probate list is, very upset and they don't want to hear from us, It's interesting because you're going to have some probate sellers who are in fact still grieving and they're not ready to talk about the property. They think you're a horrible person for even marketing to that list until they realize they need you several months later because the house is overwhelming and burdensome. But then you have some sellers that are literally filing probate because they're ready to get rid of that property. Some people wait several months before they file probate. So you have individuals that are filing for the very fact that they actually want to sell the property. So it's interesting to see the dynamic and the two different extremes in mindset. You also have individuals who are just absolutely in denial and they feel like that property is manageable. Perhaps they know someone that's in real estate, or they have a friend that's going to rent it out, family member that's going to rent the property out, and they find out later that it's not that simple. Maybe they get a tax bill or a code violation, or that house, they're not receiving the income that they thought they would, and now that house is in pre-foreclosure. That's another reason why probate is so interesting, because it turns into another lead source. It may start off as a probate and then eventually end up as a pre-foreclosure. So if you're reaching out to probates consistently, you have an opportunity to build a relationship very early, and you're literally able to hold that seller's hand, so to speak, as their situation continues to change. Finally, it's an opportunity to educate and to build a relationship. Because probate is a process, if you are getting a fresh probate list, you have the opportunity to get to know that seller really the moment that they file until an actual order is granted by a judge that gives them the legal right to dispose of the property. You're able to build that relationship really early. So before they can even legally sell the property, you know that seller, you've sat in their living room, you've left your business cards, you've left your packet, you've left them with an impression, so that when the house is actually legally able to sell, they've received correspondence from the court, you have already built a relationship. And I think that's super important, and that's one of the reasons why I love probate, because honestly, no one can do anything until that order is granted. So if you are actively pulling that information, you're there very early, you have a fresh list, that's how you'll continue to consistently win with probate. So you want to get a list early, you want to be consistent, and bring a little patience, and I think you can really win with a probate list. Let's talk about evictions. So evictions are my second favorite list next to probate, because number one, I don't think a lot of people are actually working eviction lists. It's not talked about a whole lot. And basically, you may be wondering, what's an eviction list? So an eviction list is a list of individuals who have filed an eviction. So you're not going to reach out to the person being evicted. You're going to reach out to the property owner that has actually filed an eviction. That could be anyone from a landlord to a property management company to just a traditional business, or just an individual who thinks they're a landlord and it didn't work out, and that's why they filed an eviction. Okay, so you as a professional, a real estate professional, you're able to reach out to that individual and present a solution, right? Because we love tired landlords, people that are frustrated. You can come right in and help them dispose of that property. They're typically worn out, they're motivated, they've already got a tenant headache. No one likes to go to the courthouse except for us and other individuals who work there. But most people don't want to go to the courthouse. So the fact that they went tells you that they're already frustrated, okay? Another cool thing about evictions is that they include phone numbers. Typically, there is an accurate phone number already included with the list for most cases. And any list that includes a phone number, I love, because you can send a letter, call, and text message. I encourage you to do all three. So you can be extremely aggressive. I think less people are working it because honestly, it takes a lot of work to put together an eviction list. You want an eviction list that has been filtered, pulled recently and filtered so that every single apartment has been removed, and you're just looking at residential properties. That takes a very long time for someone to put together. And then you want to also have your phone numbers available. Less people are doing that. So this presents an opportunity for investors to really find some unique deals. And you know what? Every once in a while, you're going to meet a landlord or property owner who's got several properties, okay? Because typically that's not the only one. So Those are the reasons why I love eviction. Let's talk about code violations. So there are two types of code violations. There's the ones that have just been filed within the last 30 days, which is typically what we prepare for people. And the second type are the ones that I would call extreme code violations, which means they've got a couple weeks and that house is actually going to be knocked down, right? And so what we want to do as real estate professionals, we want to be reaching out to code violations as soon as they're filed. For us, the standard is within the last 30 days. We want to send a letter, postcard, to the person that actually owns that property and let them know, hey, I can buy your house. Because what's happening is if they're not paying those code violations, those fines are adding up. And then eventually the government is going to make a decision to actually get rid of that property. As we know, areas are changing. And so if something is wrong with that property, let's say the roof has a hole in it, or they've got a bunch of junk in their yard and they're not compliant with what's going on in the area, the city or the county wants to do something about that. So it's a great list for extremely motivated people. And you've got to think about what is going on with their mindset. They're getting that sticker on the door. They're not doing anything about it. So typically that indicates to us they may not care about this property very much, or they're not even in town. Or something strange is going on that they're not immediately taking care of their code violations. So it's a really great list. That list doesn't include phone numbers, but it is something that you can send quick, short postcards to, letters, stop by. You can knock on the door, leave something, but you want to be pretty aggressive in reaching out to those code violations lists. It's a difficult list to put together, but once you have that information, those individuals are typically highly motivated. Let's talk about pre-foreclosures. So the pre-foreclosure is another highly motivated list that you would want compiled for you every 30 days. Typically that list includes the property address and the mailing address for the owner. And it is a great way to identify individuals who, to be honest, aren't even going to be able to make a decision about that property if the house is sold, okay? So you want to reach out to them before that house is auctioned off, present your cash offer. That's a great list to identify people who may be interested in like a creative deal structure. Maybe it's a subject to or owner financing type of situation, but those individuals are extremely motivated to do something with their property because the clock is ticking and they've got to do something fast. Let's talk about the tax delinquent list. So there are several types of tax lists. A tax delinquent list includes individuals who have not paid their annual tax bill. We know that if you do not pay your tax bill for several years and you get behind so much that the city or the county decides that they're actually going to take your property, okay, and a lien is put on your property. We know that the discussion of tax liens or tax deals is such a hot topic. So the tax delinquent list allows you, again, to reach out to that seller very early. Typically that list is all addresses. So it'll be the mailing address for the property and the property where the tax bill was actually issued. So you would want to send a letter or a postcard, or you can actually skip trace the list. Skip tracing means that you're actually searching for a phone number and you're using some sort of system to search for phone numbers. So you want to attack that list very aggressively. I think it's a very popular list, similar to pre-foreclosures. A lot of folks know about it. We know that there's some motivation there. So you want to be mailing that list very aggressively, or take a section of the list and actually pop up and knock on doors. But that's the tax list, and then we also can prepare a tax sale list, and those are folks that are up for sale in the next 30, 60, 90 days. All right, let's talk about the divorce list. The divorce list I consider to be a specialty list. That is something that we definitely, while we do all of our lists by hand, we really have to put on a special hat and putting that list together. It is what it sounds. It is a list of individuals who have recently filed for divorce. Typically, if we think about the mindset, what's going on in that situation, we have two individuals who are getting a divorce If there is what's called marital property or even separate property. Marital property is the property that's been acquired during the marriage, but there may be properties that individuals own before the marriage, okay? But we're looking through that situation. They're filing for a divorce, a separation is happening. As an investor or real estate agent, this is a great opportunity to find individuals who may need to dispose of property very soon. This is a great list to be sending a professional letter or a postcard. The reason why I recommend that your letter is extremely professional, including your logo, your website, as much information as possible, you can anticipate that that letter is going to be presented to an attorney. So you want to make sure that you're able to accurately and clearly indicate what your services are and what your solution is that you're presenting to that seller. But divorce is an excellent list to be reaching out to, and you just want to be consistent whether you're sending a postcard or a letter. Let's talk about cold calling. Cold calling is one of my favorite marketing approaches. I think right now the market is so hot that a lot of times by the time you send a letter, someone has already called, okay? So you want to make sure that you are cold calling or you have someone on your team that can make phone calls for you. I do think that you should, take a stab at actually making some cold calls yourself, making some mistakes so that eventually you can train someone to make the calls for you. But just be very careful with just signing up for services to make cold calls. You want to actually interview that person, find out, do they have experience in cold calling, specifically experience in cold calling for real estate investors, for the type of list that you want them to call. For example, probate takes a special individual that understands follow-up, that understands the nature of the call. What you don't want is to have someone on the phone that's making phone calls and they're saying things that are insensitive or they're not communicating your service clearly. I definitely recommend incorporating some type of recording when people are making phone calls for you so you can listen back for training purposes. There's plenty of systems out there that actually include that in their system to assist you with monitoring your cold calls. Let's talk about direct mail. So a lot of people feel like direct mail is dead. I don't agree with that statement. I think we have to be more strategic when we're sending out direct mail in this market. Of course, we're all receiving tons of letters every single day. If you check your mail right now, someone's still sending direct mail, right? And we're still opening it. But the question becomes, how do we stand out? So one suggestion, which has been definitely discussed a lot, is finding creative envelopes. So whether you're using a really bright envelope to make your postcard or your letter stand out, I think we're all always going to open something like that, right? So if I receive an invitation envelope, I'm going to open that first. I'm going to skip all my bills, all my letters, all my circulars, and I'm going to go right for that invitation. So that's a creative way to make your letter, your mail stand out. Using your actual handwriting versus just sticking, using text. You actually, if you can get someone to handwrite your envelopes for you, using stickers, whatever you can do to be different, I think that's a way to win with direct mail. Using colored paper when you're actually sending your letters, using colored postcards, just anything you can do to stand out. And then, of course, I'm always going to remind you to make sure that when you're sending direct mail, number one, that your budget permits you to send that mail consistently. You may have to send a letter 7 to 9 times before you actually get a response from that person. So before you start a direct mail campaign, you want to make sure you're able to be organized. You want to make sure that you can do it consistently and that your budget permits. And then the most important thing is think about the leads that you're doing your direct mail to. You don't want to spend all of your money on letters, on envelopes, on stickers, on all these bells and whistles, and you're sending it to a bad list. So really scrubbing your list, really thinking about it being targeted, perhaps smaller, using a probate list or an eviction list or a code violation list that has someone who has recently entered this situation. That's where I'm going to put my money. That's where I'm going to focus my efforts. So you might be sending less letters, but I would rather send less letters and know that people are actually calling me back and I know why I sent the letter the way that I did, than to send 1,000 letters to a bad list and nobody calls me back. So let's talk about our goals with direct mail. Our number one goal is what? To be opened. There's nothing worse than to send some letters and you find out your letter got shifted over into bulk mail, that your letter never got there. It's going to a bad address. So when you go and check your P.O. box, which hopefully you're using a P.O. box for your letters, and half of your letters are in there, we want to make sure our letters are getting to the seller and that they're actually being opened. So another reminder, we want to make sure that our mail pieces are unique, that our mail pieces are actually designed. I recommend getting a graphic designer to actually create your postcard, to actually design your letter, anything that you can do to make yourself stand out. Unfortunately, a lot of people are investing in systems, and so while they're great for consistency, you don't want to be the fourth person to send postcard number one that has the person standing next to the mailbox, who needs to sell their house. Like, you want to make sure that your postcard has been designed for you and your business. And I think that's a way to stand out. So that's definitely something to consider. And I want a reaction, so if a seller calls me and they scream at me and they say, don't send me a letter ever again, I'm okay with that because at least I know you got it, or maybe they ask me to come for an appointment, and whether that appointment works out is a different story, but I just want to make sure I'm actually getting a response from my sellers and that my letters are getting there. So these are all things that we want to consider. Here are my top tips for real estate investors or real estate agents that are getting ready to start a direct mail campaign. Number one, when you're reaching out to a seller, try to keep your message generic. You don't want to change your mail piece to address their problem. So if they're in pre-foreclosure, we don't want the letter to say foreclosure help on the outside. Now, if you have a general list that says I'm an expert or I've helped individuals with foreclosures, probates, evictions, and you're just kind of listing it, I think that that's a really great approach because we don't want the letter to go to the neighbor's house and now their information has been shared. The second tip would be to budget, okay? So when you create your marketing budget, you want to continue to ask yourself, is this something that I can spend monthly? Okay, so take a look at your budget, make sure that you can be consistent throughout the year or for 6 months, and you have an actual measurable amount of time that you're going to consistently spend the amount that you've allocated for your budget, your mail pieces, your postage, any assistance that you have. You want to create this budget and make sure you can stick to it. Okay, schedule a time to actually analyze your results. Okay, that'd be the third tip I give you. Actually take a time, maybe once a month or once a week, where you actually look at how things are working. Do I need to change my letters? Do I need to change my envelopes? Perhaps the list that I'm working isn't the best, okay? But actually give your list some time to actually, prosper in your marketing campaign, okay? But actually call your list provider, have a conversation. Maybe you're sending a bad mail piece and we don't want it to be an entire year and you haven't gotten any feedback. And I think that's one of the cool things about coming to classes or going to real estate meetings. You want to talk to individuals about what's working in your market, okay? Also track your pieces, okay? So on your letters, you can use color coding or something so that when a seller calls you back, you'll actually know what mail piece they responded to, okay? And also finally, consider changing your mail piece. So you may be contacting the same seller every month, but 1 month, let's send them a postcard. The next month, send them a letter. You can even incorporate a phone call on the third month. You just want to change your contact, keep the contact consistent, but you can do it different ways and monitor to see what has the best reaction. Hi, my name is Deanna Britt, and I am the owner of Law Clerk On Demand. We are a leading list provider. Our team of law clerks pulls fresh information from the courthouse every 30 days, fresh information lists such as probate, evictions, code violations, divorce, tax delinquents, you name it, and we will pull it from the courthouse. If you would like to reach us, you can visit our website, which is lawclerkondemand.com, Law Clerk On Demand on Instagram, and Law Clerk On Demand on Facebook. Our phone number is 770-376-7533, or you can send us an email at leads@lawclerkondemand.com.